Good morning, students of class 9. Welcome back to the online classes now. Let's continue our lesson in history, the French Revolution. We have reached 3.2 now. The Directory rules the France. They managed to govern France. So, who were the directors? Let's see now. Before this, Robespierre, number 1. There are altogether 7 points. Robespierre was convicted by the court. We have learned in our previous class. He was convicted, found guilty by the court in July 1794. He was arrested and the next day he was guillotined. His head was chopped off. Till there we have finished in our previous class. He was arrested and guillotined the next day. His head was chopped off in the public square, in full public view, just like the king. Before king and his queen Mary Antoinette they were also guillotined. So now after this, after the fall of the Jacobin government, because Robespierre was the leader, head of the Jacobin club, he was made the leader, head. So the fall of the Jacobin government in France, the fall of the Jacobin government allowed the rich middle classes, wealthy middle classes to seize power. Now they become conservatives. Now there are frequent ups and downs that took place, events that took place in France. Many a times, several rulers were changed during these revolutionary years. So, after the fall of Jacobin government, after the Robespierre was guillotined, the Jacobin government fell down and the rich or the wealthy middle classes seized power. They became very powerful and they seized power. They began to govern France. A new law, constitution means laws. A new constitution was framed or made. A new law was made which denied the vote to non-property section of the society, just like before. We have learned during conservatives. When we were learning conservatives, radicals, liberals, conservatives, during that period when we are learning conservatives, we have seen that only the rich property people were allowed to vote. They were called active citizens. So here the same process followed again, revived. So the new class or the new law made by this wealthy section of the society, the law denied the vote. Denied means not refused, not allowed to cast the vote to the non-property sections. To the non-property means poor people section of the society. So the same old system was revived. 2 legislative councils were formed. Instead of one, they formed 2 legislative councils. And these 2 legislative councils, then appointed a directory. The legislative councils, these 2 groups, 2 legislative councils, appoint means keep. They appointed a directory. Directory means an executive made up of 5 members. 5 members were elected by the two legislative councils. 5 members were elected, appointed. They were called directories. So directory, because they were called executive, in a sense an executive who implement laws, an executive made up of 5 directors. So these legislative councils then appointed a directory, 5 members. You can see that. What happened after that? Did they rule properly? The directors, 5 members. The directors often fought with the legislative councils. There was a difference between their views, the directors and the legislative councils. they clashed very often. They had a misunderstanding among themselves. So the directors often means most of the time, clashed, fought, argued, discussed or fought with the legislative councils, who then sought means tried to dismiss them. Legislative councils, they tried to dismiss those 5 directors. And the situation was very tense, disturbing. The political instability, you can see that instability, it is not a stable government, because within that council, legislative council and directories, executive, they fought among themselves. The political instability of the directory paved the way. Paved means made the way for the rise of a military dictator. So the military dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. So Napoleon Bonaparte took over, because he was a military general, he took over France, and he dismissed the directory, he dismissed the councils, and he took over. So the political instability of the directory paved the way for the rise of a military dictator named Napoleon Bonaparte. So in this way, Napoleon took over France and he became the ruler, a dictator. In the beginning, we will learn later on. In the beginning, Napoleon ruled the country in a democratic way, but as the time passed, slowly he turned into a dictator. So now, the ideals of freedom during these revolutionary years, during these revolutionary periods, the ideals of freedom, equality before the law, fraternity remain inspiring ideals that motivated political movements in France and in Europe. This idea also spread around the world. So, these ideals of freedom, equality before the law, fraternity, sovereignty remained an inspiring ideals that motivated the revolutionaries in France as well as in Europe, around Europe, and the revolutionary were inspired around the world for their freedom struggle. So Europe, during the coming years, during the coming centuries, during the coming years, the revolutionary or freedom struggle, the fighters, they got inspiration from these ideals of freedom, fraternity, equality, sovereignty, liberty. These ideals inspired them to carry on their struggle, freedom struggle in Europe, in around the world. So in this way, this is a directory rules France. Now you can see the political instability and Napoleon took over the power. So that's all for today. We'll meet in the next class and continue our lesson. So what happened after that? So that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching.